We've passed the 72-hour window now since the incident in Nashville. So we're just going to talk about this. We're going to be real and maybe a little bit raw. Hi, everybody. John McLaughlin, and I'm being joined by Adam Winch from Defenders USA and another of our favorite guys out there, Ed Monk from Last Resort Firearms Training. We've passed the 72-hour window now since the incident in Nashville. So we're just going to talk about this. We're going to be real and maybe a little bit raw. But I tell you what, even though it's been 3 days since this is passed now, guys, I am literally just as angry or upset with a little bit of passing as time as watching this the first time and wondering, when are people going to learn that the guns aren't the issue? The issue is, if bad people come, we have to figure out a way to stop them from coming in the door. Adam, you want to kick off?
Yeah, I fully agree with you on that. Unfortunately, right, I've approached many Christian schools, churches, a lot of different things like this, and have offered this type of training literally at zero cost or just enough to cover my own cost on it. And the vast majority of time, they've not taken me up on it. Now, as of the last day or two, I'm starting to get calls from places that previously had refused training or just weren't interested that now want it. And unfortunately, the biggest thing is they need to get this training so that they can respond to it instead of having to wait for the officers to arrive, because that's a long time frame to wait.
Yeah, I was just looking at my phone and it's the same thing. John, can you come to our church? Can you help us get organized? We've been available to people forever, and I don't know if we've kind of went from a trickle to where the dam is broken. Now they're seeing it's a serious issue. Ed, what are you seeing? I mean, you're the national expert on countering this active shooter threat.
I'm seeing a little bump, not nearly the tidal wave that I saw with Uvalde, but I'm seeing a little bump. People are going to get a little excited about it, but I don't think they're going to get greatly excited about it because of the low victim count. Which was we just completely lucked out on. The shooter just was not aggressive, and I think because of that, we're not going to learn anything, or we may learn the wrong lesson. It's like I got nothing but praise so far for the cops when they got there and did their business, but they got there somewhere between 11 and 17 minutes. I keep seeing different time frames, but everything I've read says more than 10 minutes after the first shot.
Yeah,
and we only have.
Go ahead. According to your research, I mean, if it was just math and time, I mean, literally everybody in that school could have been dead.
Yeah, Parkland, he shot 34 in 5.5 minutes. Stockton shot 35 in only 3 minutes. Fairchild shot 26 in less than 2.5 minutes. Pulse shot 102 in 17 minutes. So the fact that this shooter was in there unopposed for some amount of time, over 10 minutes, and only got 6. We are extremely lucky. My fear is that it'll cause aggressive police response. If we can just get the police to aggressively respond like these guys did, we'll always have a low victim count. And I think that we may learn the wrong lesson there. And then keeping them from coming in the door, I don't think is realistic, because again, with middle and high schools, the shooter is probably one of your own students, so that doesn't really come into play there. And I guess there's some things you could do, but what I tell schools is, if you until you get rid of all the glass, then the doors and windows are only early warning. They will delay him about 5 seconds, and that gives you early warning to get your welcoming party ready for him if you have a plan for a welcoming party. But
that's something I struggle with talking to schools. They love the idea that they have their locked entryway. They have to look in a camera or sign in on an iPad to be buzzed in. But this event showed us that several rounds from a firearm took that glass out, and the shooter actually just kind of walked underneath the door frame and was in a matter of seconds.
Exactly like Sandy Hook did. So again, this is not something new that, we didn't know they would do that. The Geico Lizard will sign in. The Geico Lizard will rattle the door, and when it won't open, he'll turn around and go away. But the Tyrannosaurus Rex will break his way in, and that's who's coming, and that's what we have to plan for.
So I watched the shooting through the glass, and I just sat there and thought, there's so many different things that are several different products you can put on that glass to help to help mitigate some of the round impact to where it makes it a lot longer, right? John and I talked previously yesterday about this. So John, you might want to talk about that, but that could be one more delay by another 5 or 10 or 15 seconds that would be helpful. The low round count in this case seemed like there was a lack of aggression in the shooter, right? There's obviously aggression, true people, but either that or the school had such lockdown procedures that it helped mitigate it. But I was truly surprised by the extremely low round count. I mean, 10 to 16 minutes before the cops get there, that person should have been stacking bodies right and left. So God's hand was in there somewhere.
Right. Yeah. Some things I'm waiting to see. One is, what are the interior walls? Are they brick, or are they, do the walls stop the bullets, or will they not? That'll probably play some part in it. And of course, I haven't seen any video other than shooting through the glass to enter the building. I have not seen any of the video of the active shooter shooting people. So I don't know where that was. I'm not, in my head, don't have, the path. And the narration I kept hearing referred to church and school and church and school. I don't know if those are two different parts of this structure. So I don't know if the shooter wasted a lot of time in the church area where there wasn't anybody. And that's one of the reasons we have a low victim count. I just don't know. But
so Ed, from what I understand, and I could be wrong in this, I've been traveling for several days, so I haven't caught all of it. But from what I understand, it started in the church and then moved to the school, right? It's two separate entities combined under the church itself. So it sounds like it started there. Oftentimes, like when church shootings happen, it starts in the parking lot. In this case, going to the school, it sounds like it started in the church, which gave some precursor warning to those inside the school to begin working their lockdown procedures, which seems like they had down pretty well. So it seems like there was some warning on the outside. Unfortunately, people lost their lives. Probably the custodian lost his life at that point before it actually moved into the school.
Yeah, I heard the custodian was actually shot with those first few rounds that came through the door. So again, I don't know how much time was possibly in an area where there wasn't anybody. So, did the shooter waste a whole bunch of minutes in the church portion where after she shot the custodian on the way in, there wasn't anybody to shoot? Again, I don't know. That's all stuff I'm going to wait to try to see.
Right. Yeah, until we get more video of inside, and obviously there's cameras in there. I'm sure it just hasn't been released yet. So just talking to normal people, they're like, well, if I was there, I would have charged toward that door when the gunfire started and put rounds, back down range. But how is it that, number one, we identify the right people in schools and churches and then get them through the training? And Ed, I know you've been to Iowa a couple times. Can you take us through what's the morphology of starting with a school that's interested and then bringing them down the path to actually, being well trained, obviously there and willing to go?
Yeah, and I've spent a lot of money on training. I make some money on training. I'm a big supporter of training, but advanced training is not required. Eli Dickens showed us that in the mall. What's really required is, are you there? Are you close enough to hear it and see it? Do you have a gun, and are you willing to use it? If you can't get good hits past 7 yards, then I have to get within 7 of him. So it's identifying people who want to, and to the best of our ability. I mean, we can't even do this well with cops. To the best of our ability, are they somebody that can handle this and do this? And getting enough of them so that we can spread them out intelligently, geographically, spread them out on the property, so that no matter where it starts, at least one of them is likely to shoot. At least one is likely to hear it or see it. But in the training, I think the top 3 things are getting them to understand the active shooter attack and the environment of the fight. So that's the mental component. And then, of course, just safe gun handling and safe gun carry as they carry it in this environment. And then they have to know their capabilities. They have to know where they can guarantee their hits and then work within that. There's a bunch of stuff you can do after that that'll make them a little better or maybe a little more confident. But those 3 things doesn't take so. And one of those schools in Iowa that I trained, their police chief came out publicly with a letter opposing armed staff. And one of his many faulty reasonings was, look, we have a multi-county multi-jurisdictional SWAT team that's extremely highly trained and extremely well equipped and is much more likely to be successful than this than an armed staff member. But nowhere in the letter did he talk about the time it would take to assemble that multi-jurisdictional task force, get them together, get them to the school, and get them inside the school. So we've still got people making policy or affecting policy that are in no way taking the clock into a consideration. Yeah, so I'd rather have John Wick than the calculus teacher at the school. But if John Wick can't get there for 15 minutes, I want the calculus teacher to take care of it.
Amen. So let me jump in here for a second, right? So that people kind of know here, understand we're going to say both things, cops, some things are not sound as good, and bias here. Understand both Ed and I have spent quite a bit amount of time in law enforcement community as cops, SWAT guy, stuff like that. So understand we're coming at it from that perspective too. Mm-hmm. As for those watching, I just want to make sure you understand that, because there's probably going to be praise of the cops' actions and maybe even some criticism too. And it's coming from a background of understanding it well.
And even when I praise cop action, which I do quite a bit, and I'm probably going to do for this, I will still criticize the system that brings the cops there. Again, everything I've seen, very little, but everything I've seen on the cops here, applauding, standing ovation the whole way. But if they don't get there until, in most active shooter attacks, we didn't pay the price on this one. But in most active shooter attacks, if really aggressive, brave, well-trained, equipped cops show up at the 12-minute mark, you're going to have a whole lot of people shot. So, yeah, like I said, I would rather have John Wick there when it starts. But if he's 15 minutes away, I want someone less trained and less equipped than John Wick to handle it, because the clock is the most important thing. Math and time is the most important thing.
Now, Adam, from all the training you've done, have you been able to watch a progression from a new shooter that, as they go through your various classwork, start to develop what I would call a warrior mindset or the combat mindset, where they maybe didn't even realize that that existed within them, but through training and time and exposure to some, real life, watching the kind of videos we see on active self-protection, that starts to come out and turn into a citizen warrior. Yeah,
the beauty is, for those of us who have just a basic moral compass, it's already kind of inbuilt in us by, I'd say, God, to be protectors. So therefore, the large majority of people who are going to come to gun training have some semblance of already that warrior mindset, as you're talking about, or that willingness to protect. But but what I do think is we need to hone and sharpen that, just like we would train anything. We need to train both the heart and the mind for that warrior mindset to be willing to go to the sound of the guns, right? In this case, as Ed has said several times, John Wick versus the calculus teacher, right? John Wick is not going to be there, just not, right? Ed's research shows that over and over. And if you guys don't know Ed Monk and his research, you need to delve deep into that, right? For those churches and schools who do this, you need to get to know Ed Monk and his work. Right. So therefore, for all of us who train people, it's incumbent upon us to instill upon them that warrior mindset, that warrior heart set, really, of those that are there and willing to do it. And you know what? That takes time and effort to hone that. So therefore, building that hardness of a heart, that strength of character, being willing to run to the gun if they have to, even if it's all by themselves and they are the calculus teacher, or they are the janitor, or they are the principal of the school. Right, being willing to do that. Now also go not just to stand there and to try to stop the bad guy, but to aggressively address that bad guy or bad people. I mean, that's an important component. And really, it sometimes seems like to me, for these schools, these churches, it's almost like we need to give them permission or let them know that there is a permission to be extremely moralistically violent in response to evil if they need to. So we as defenders have that moral imperative to do that, and to bring that violence to somebody else who needs that actually takes a heart set that we have to train into them. So I've seen the progression of people as they come. They usually come in just wanting basic handgun fundamental classes. And those that go, wait a minute, I need to protect my family, maybe my kids, my whatever else. And they really spend the time to hone the heart and the mind. it seems like over time, as I and others spend time with them, they truly hone that, and they become, in a sense, their own warrior monk. And that's what they need to become, right? Carrying a gun in defense of life is not just for yourself. Oftentimes it's for others. And so therefore that natural aggression has to be built in. And to build that in, you have to spend time honestly pondering it, squaring it with your God, squaring it with your soul, squaring it with your training, everything else, because when the time comes, you have to just go. And you can't wait for that cop to show up, because I know for me, I was always 3 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes away, and I can't save you in those time frames. You have to do it yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I tend to see, like in the church security world that I roll in, when you get a group of guys together, they start like feeding off of each other, and you may be able to, it's almost like a competition when something happens, or some guy, a DLR or whatever, we got to be on lookout for somebody and they show up. It's like, who wants to be there first now? And I would hope we could see that in the schools. If, let's say, you have the calculus teacher, the shop teacher, the janitor, whatever, that, start doing training and doing exercises and scenario role playing, that mindset starts to increase. Would you say that's accurate or a possibility?
Yeah, yes. To me, I look at it this way, especially with the church, schools, churches. Here am I, Lord, send me.
Send me.
Right? Here am I, Lord, send me. And therefore, I don't care if the cops are coming or not, or there's somebody else there who has their own mindset, their own weapons to defend. You're going to have to fight me to get to that person first, in a sense. I want to be the first one there, right? Because whether I take the rounds or not, here am I, Lord, send me. Right. So therefore, in that protective mindset, we've got to just go. You just have to go. And it doesn't matter to me what your calling is within that school. It doesn't matter what your calling is in life. When it comes time to protect those kids and all these other people, somebody needs to respond. And therefore, it might need to be you. And you've got to fight your way, hurdle the bodies if you have to get there to stop this evil.
Ed, what about the folks, the naysayers out there that talk about, well, if you train these teachers and they're carrying concealed, that, they're going to shoot the wrong person?
Yeah, I call those my boogeyman arguments.
Yep.
And of course, that's what this police chief said in his open letter, when I'll say, and it could happen. Anything could happen, but it never has happened. So do you want to let the active shooter shoot for 5 or 10 minutes unopposed, because there is a very low chance that an armed person present might shoot the wrong person? Or do we want to have our plan to end it in the first 30 seconds? Armed citizens have never shot the wrong person. Cops have multiple times. Cops have shot and killed each other twice responding to active shooters. So even though armed citizens have a better safety success record in stopping active shooters early without stopping anybody else, we never make the argument that cops might shoot the wrong person, even though they actually have, but we'll make it for the citizens. And it's been my experience when I go into schools and the school actually supports doing things better, that when you tell not just teachers, custodians, counselors, everybody, every adult in the building, when you tell them, you don't sit there and wait for the intercom system, the speaker in the ceiling to tell you what to do. You choose. Here are your 3 options. They will all suck, but you figure out which one sucks the least for you at your location, given your conditions, and you violently execute the least worst option. And when these adults are allowed to do that instead of following some rule, they get real creative. It frees them to look around and save themselves. And they get a lot of power out of that. And I've seen a lot of great ideas come out of school staff members when they're given that.
Now, the first time I went through Alice training, the people doing the training says, "Don't be John McLaughlin." And I said, "Well, that's who I am." "No, here's your options. You can throw foam balls. You can do this." That's not how this works in real life.
Yeah. This last week I did 2 conferences. I did Alita, which is all cops, and I did the tactical conference. At Alita, I'm talking to all cops, and I'll do this sometime when I'm talking to cops. I'll say, you get a call for an active shooter. You pull up to that building. Are you taking your gun in with you, or are you going to take it off and leave it in the car when you go in? And they look at me like I'm stupid. Like, what a stupid thing to ask. That would be absolute insanity to leave your gun and go up against an active shooter without your gun. And I'm like, well, that's exactly what we're mandating that the staff of the schools do.
Yes.
So we know, the cops know they're not going in there without their gun, and they probably could try to go in there with 2 guns if they could. But that's what we're asking the staff to do. Now, I know 95+% of schools in America are not going to have armed staff right now. Don't agree with it, but that's the way it is. So even with schools that they're not going to do it, either because there's no legal way or they're just not going to do it, then they still have to go from call somebody on the phone to come fix this. Then we're going to fix this. We're just not going to fix it with a gun because we can't legally have one. We still have to teach them how to fight. And so when I talk to those schools, I go heavy showing them successful unarmed staff and students who went up against an active shooter and stopped them. The Thurston High School a student did that. STEM High School, 3 students did that. Middle school, I think in Indiana, the teacher did that after getting shot. Another middle school, a teacher in the parking lot stopped it. And then there's actually an elementary school in California where a construction worker nearby drove over the active shooter with his truck. So by whatever means available, counterattack, be ruthlessly, viciously, deadly violent against this guy. And if they can turn that corner, then we can get down the road.
I saw Adam raising his hand there, motioning. Did you want to jump in on this?
No, yeah, I was completely agreeing with him. You're right. I mean, it doesn't matter how you stop this guy, whether it's with a bullet, with a truck, with a broom. I could care less, right? The second most of these active shooters encounter any type of determined resistance, even almost lackadaisical resistance, they oftentimes either A, run away, or more importantly, turn the gun on themselves. And if they shoot themselves, I mean, it's the same thing as somebody else shooting them, right? So, right, Ed might say something different, but in my limited experience compared to Ed and his research, it seems to me like, as I've looked at these type of people are oftentimes cowards. They don't want to take the cops' bullets, so they'll do it to themselves, right? So, I mean, either way, threat ended.
Yeah, they're not expecting someone to fight them in that first minute. And you can see that. You can see the Uvalde shooter. You can see this shooter. I mean, she had the gun up some, but she did a lot of just walking around holding the gun at her side. So they know in those first couple of minutes, they do not expect any fighting. And we don't have to send people to jiu-jitsu classes, but we can just show them how to fight them at a corner, fight them in a door, fight them when they turn and walk in another direction, or fight them as a group. Some very simple ways, and show them successes of, yes, both students and faculty in the past that have said, I'm not just going to watch him shoot 20 or 30 of us. We're going to attack him. And it works most of the time.
It was pretty obvious in this case. Somebody came into the building, a solo gunman, they're wandering around. I don't know of any school staff member that, if they were armed, couldn't look out in the hallway and say, yeah, that's the shooter right there. Put rounds on it.
Yeah, I'll show a video like this. I'll show a video or a still photo of the Parkland guy, somebody in a school holding a long gun. And I'll say, who in here has, will admit you have absolutely no police experience at all. And unless I'm talking to cops, a whole bunch of people, and I say, with no police experience, can you identify who the active shooter is? And yeah, of course, it's the person. Yeah, right. It's the person holding the gun. So when I cover things like Jack Wilson and Gina Somm and David George and Eli Dickin and all the heroes, armed citizens who have stopped active shooters, I say, he did not, or she did not, misidentify who the active shooter was and therefore shoot the wrong person. They did not identify who the active shooter was, but shoot wildly and inaccurately and hit innocent people. And responding cops didn't show up and shoot the good person by mistake, because they showed up 3, 4, 5, 8 minutes after the first shot. So, yeah.
So let me jump in on this. As Ed's talking about how they're not, the citizen responders not shooting wildly, right? From the research I've seen, when civilians engage with guns, they tend to be very judicious and they tend to aim extremely well, right? Where cops, where we've been through so many scenario trainings, everything else, sometimes we spray and pray a little bit, right? Where the citizen defender tends to be a little bit more prudent with their aim and with their shots. So, I mean, to me, that's one of the many arguments of why in the world should we not let any and every citizen, teacher or not, within a school district carry a gun if they want to, right? Because they tend to be a little bit more accurate and careful with their aim and their shots.
I had not actually thought through that detail, but as Adam was saying that, I just off the top of my head, Vic Stacy got 5 hits out of 5 shots. David George, these are all armed citizens.
Right.
5 hits out of 5 shots. Gina Som, 10 hits out of 10 shots. Eli was 8 hits out of 10 shots. And Jack Wilson, of course, was the big 1-for-1. I could probably dig my brain and go in deeper, but yeah, much higher hit rate compared with my information on Pulse was after they blew a hole in the wall. They shot 172 rounds and hit him 7 times. So yeah, they are more, they don't do the volume fire. They do more precise fire.
So I think it almost comes from familiarity, right? Familiarity sometimes breeds contempt, or at least familiarity, right? So from what I've read and seen and everything else in the law enforcement world I was in, it seemed like the average hit rate in a law enforcement shoot is really about 18, 20, 25% of the time. Civilians are nailing it far higher than that. And that's an important component here.
Yep. So looking at this, what was normal, elementary school shooters are outsiders. They're not students currently of that school. They're not parents. They're not teachers. Multiple weapons, at least one of which was a long gun, and locked doors with glass. Don't keep them outside. So those are all normal. What was odd, this is the first private school that I'm aware of. So since Uvalde, I've talked to a lot of schools. Several of them have been private. And up until a few days ago, I would say, listen, I'm going to give you some examples and statistics, but understand those are all from public schools because I have no data from private schools because there's never been a private school attack. But I'd always tell them we're not immune. And we just found out we're not immune. So that was kind of an outlier. It was the first private school. Females, they're not the majority by far. And this was just really, really slow. Kind of like Columbine, but I think if I run the numbers, it's actually slower than Columbine. So there are some really, really rapid, fast outliers like Tucson and Dayton. And this is going to fall into the very, very slow outlier. Basically, one person shot every 2.5 minutes.
That's unheard of.
Yeah, until we see more video or, have an analysis of all the cameras in different parts of the schools, and we're not going to know whether they went in and did that all in the first, minute or two and then wandered aimlessly for 11 minutes waiting on police. We'll just, can't make judgment there yet. We'll have to wait and see, but definitely odd to have an 11, 13-minute response time, whatever it works out to be, and not have, could have been like a Pulse situation. There could have easily been 100 people dead there. Or shot.
Again, I trust nothing in the media, but today I read the text messages that the shooter apparently sent a sports former teammate. And she said, talked about wanting to die. It's her time to die. She wanted to die. She never talked about, I want to kill people. I want to hurt people. So,
right.
Kind of one indicator with me that maybe the school shooting was to get attention, maybe hurt her parents. I don't know. But she definitely, I don't think, was wanting to get a high body count.
So,
and probably end it in a suicide by cop, which they obliged her.
Yes.
So let me jump in on this, right? Something I found out very quickly in my law enforcement world, that suicide is a pale shade of homicide, right? And the second somebody starts making some type of suicidal statements, to me, that's always an immediate indicator that maybe, just maybe, they want to go out with a bang, right? They want to get some new news media, or maybe they're a little bit grumpy about somebody or something that happened in their life, and they want to take those people or those that they care and love about with them while they go, right? So to me, that's an immediate indicator that I would tell you for the folks watching this is, if you know people, whether it's loved ones or not, it doesn't matter. If they're starting to make any type of suicidal statements, remember, suicide is a pale shade of homicide. They might try to take somebody else with them, and that could be you or those you love. So therefore, it is something to pay attention to.
Yeah, I saw that same piece of video / audio where, the person called and was concerned, but, didn't have a phone number for the Instagram post for the actual person that allegedly is the shooter here. And so, what are the police supposed to do? They ended up, I think, making contact with the person, but they had to drive somewhere and look at the phone, and of limited value when something's about to go down.